So this month it has officially been 6 months that I've had my fire skink Roku. Everybody has been asking me to make a care video about him ever since I got him, but I decided that that's wrong of me to make a care video about a species I've never kept before, like right after I get them. So I was like, let me wait 6 months at the minimum, and if he's growing well and everything's going fine, then I'll make a video. So I've learned quite a bit too, so I'm really glad that I did not share the video before learning and before allowing 6 months to pass and for Roku to get a bit bigger. So now that 6 months have passed, I feel confident in sharing my care guide. If this ever becomes out-of-date information, I'm going to delete this video, but if there are some changes I need to make and most of the information is still sound, I will include everything in the links below. No matter what point in time you're watching this, whether it just came out or whether it's 6 months later, please go ahead and check below to see any information I might have added or changed. I'm going to start by discussing how I keep my fire skink, like based on his enclosure. So let's start with enclosure size. Now fire skinks get, I think, like 12 to 15 inches, so they're a pretty sizable skink, but definitely nowhere near as big as a blue-tongued skink. Some websites say that the minimum is a 20-gallon long, which I think is abhorrent, and others say that a 40-gallon is a minimum and they keep a pair in there. I keep my single fire skink in a 40-gallon. It's actually the 36 by 18 by 18 Exoterra, which is the same floor space as a 40-gallon for those who don't know. The reason I would not keep a fire skink in a 20-gallon long is because they're a very active species, especially underneath the substrate, and they like to climb and like to engage with their environment, and I think that a 20-gallon long would be way too small, like literally too small. The enclosure must have loose substrate because they are a burrowing species. For Roku, I keep him in Eco Earth, and I keep him in a lot of Eco Earth, and I'm going to keep adding Eco Earth as he gets bigger, but right now he is in, like, some of the enclosure has, I would say, 8 inches, other parts have 4 inches, some have 6 inches. It really just depends because they're all a bit different, but there is definitely at least a minimum of 4 inches all around, and that's how it should be. The reason I use Eco Earth is because it holds humidity. The species requires 60 to 70% humidity, but the surface of the enclosure doesn't have to be as humid as you want the substrate to be. So the surface can drop to 40% humidity, but you really want it to be humid inside the substrate, which is why Eco Earth is a really great choice because it holds moisture well. I have seen that some people mix Eco Earth with other types of substrates, or they'll take like plain soil and mix that with something else. It really is just up to your own personal preference. Do some research on other people's care, obviously more than just mine. Like I say in every care video, I only have my own experience to go off of and the research that I've done, and you should definitely do your own research and watch other people's videos, read other people's information, other forums, yada yada, in order to determine what is the best care for you and your fire skink. So I use Eco Earth. That's just what I prefer, and some people use other things and some people use mixes. One thing about the substrate is you're going to want to replace it fully every 2 to 4 months. I replace it in half increments just because that's easier for me. So I replace like a half every 2 months, and then I'll replace the next half every 2 months, and so on and so forth. Obviously, if you see your fire skink like using the bathroom in the substrate, remove like that portion of substrate, but literally I never see my fire skinks poop. Like, I don't know where it is. I can never find it. It's like either really, really little or it's just gone. Like, every time I mix his substrate, I never see it. And speaking of mixing his substrate, I spray down his enclosure once every day, like really, really well. And then once every few weeks, I will mix up the substrate and really like dump a lot of water in it and make it moist all over again, just so that it's like a nice consistency of moistness instead of it just being like dry on the top and moist underneath. I'll just mix it up all over again, and that also lets me look at my fire skink because he doesn't really come out much when I'm around. He's a very shy guy, and we'll get into that later. He typically only comes out to bask in the mornings, and then he eats, and then that's that. He doesn't want me to see him. So I use that opportunity where I mix up his substrate to get a good look at him and also make sure everything in his enclosure is up to par. So one more thing about the substrate is I would avoid like large chunky substrate like aspen or cypress mulch. One, you want something that holds humidity, and I know that cypress mulch can, but I don't know, like, I don't think it's good because it's huge chunky pieces, and they're like burrowers at heart. They like to create like little like caves and nooks inside of the substrate, and so cypress mulch is just like huge and collapsible, and I don't think that it would work well. But again, that's up to you in your personal preference. I just don't think that it would work well for a fire skink. I also would avoid sand. I just prefer Eco Earth altogether. For a full-grown fire skink, you're going to want at least 6 inches all across the board. Right now, Roku is only like tiny. He's still growing. He's not even like, I would say he's just a little bit over a third of his full grown size, or like what he will be when he's full grown. So right now he has eco-worth, like a significant amount of eco-worth, obviously, as I explained earlier, but he does not have 6 inches all around. He has more like 4 in some places and 8 in others. For a full grown fire skink, you're going to want to provide at least 6 inches. So because fire skinks are so shy by nature, you're going to want to supply a lot of hides. If you ever really want your fire skink to like start showing itself more, it needs to feel secure in its enclosure. And the way to do that is to offer hides and low-bearing plants and a lot of substrate and things that'll make it feel secure. So I offer 3 hides in my fire skink enclosure that you'll see later when I give it like a little bit of a tour to like show you guys exactly how I set up my fire skink's house. But he has a large cork round, kind of like, it's round in the front and flat in the back. It's very weird, but it's a cork hide nonetheless, and it's really big and it's kind of buried in the dirt, so it like allows him to burrow and hide in it at the same time. He also gets on top of it for basking, but we'll get to basking in a minute. In addition to the his cork hide, he has a like half log, like a haba hut thing, and he also has an Exoterra like low cave, like it's like this big and it's really low, and I just bury dirt over top of it, and then I stack another hide on top of that, which is the half log. So it allows him plenty of hiding places in the enclosure, like to quickly duck away from when I come into the room. In addition to the hides, he also has the low-bearing plants. He has 2 Exoterra ferns in the size large. Also, my frogs are making a lot of noise right now, my apologies. But they like fold down to the ground like really low, and so he like weaves around them and makes sure he feels nice and secure when he's running around his house. So he has those 2 to help him feel secure, and he also has a large driftwood piece that's kind of like folded over in on itself, so he just runs in there when he's feeling like he needs some security too. So let's get to the heat sources. Fire skinks need to have 2 primary heat sources. You're going to want to supply your fire skink with a under tank heater as well as a basking light. So for Roku, the under tank heater he has is only situated under his cork hide. Mind you, his cork hide is pretty big, so it takes up like well over a third of the enclosure, and so the heater is under a third of the enclosure. I have it set to 90 so that it radiates through the substrate a bit to get into the 80s, so that the surface of one side of the enclosure is in the 80s, which by the way, their ambient temperatures should be in the mid 80s with a basking spot of 92 to 94. His basking spot is like 92 exactly. It's a little on the cooler end than 94, but that's fine obviously because it works. And so I have his heat lamp and his heat pad on the same side, and then that heat builds up to, you know, in the mid 80s, and then the other side of his enclosure is in the high 70s, so usually between 75 and 78, and that's where he can retreat if he wants to cool down a bit. Oh, also my under tank heater is set with a thermostat. That's how I know it's set at 90. In order to provide a basking spot, I use a 70-watt mega ray mercury vapor bulb that offers heat and UVB. Now, some people will say UVB isn't essential for this species. I disagree, since they are a diurnal species and I have seen my fire skink actually basking. I would recommend having UVB. Now, some people have UVB like as a tube across their enclosure, and that's fine. I use a mercury vapor bulb because it offers a lot of UVB as well as a lot of heat, and therefore serves 2 purposes at the same time. And since he's only really out to bask, he's not getting UVB anywhere else. Like I said, he's typically under the substrate, like sneaking around a bit. So when he comes out every morning and basks after breakfast, he's always getting that UVB and that heat, and he just really enjoys it. He like likes to bask really early in the morning when I'm like sleeping in my bed still, because I'm quiet and not bothering him. So you'll want to keep that under tank heater on 24/7 so that he has a way to get, you know, warmth, but the bulb can be turned off every 12 hours. So I have mine set on a timer from like 7 to 7, so he has a 12-hour light period and then 12-hour dark period. In the winter, you'll want to make that shorter because the days are shorter, so a 10-hour period is more acceptable. And at nighttime, you can let the temperatures drop into the 70s. Like I said, I still keep the heater on so that he has the choice of being in the warmth, but the temperatures can drop into the 70s on the surface of the enclosure. Something else to note about the enclosure is that it should have a secure lid or doors, because fire skinks are not only fast, but they're excellent climbers. They're very agile, and so if you give your skink the opportunity to escape, it very well may. One time, Roku climbed up my sleeve. I had my hand in the enclosure, and and when he was still a little thing, he climbed right up my sleeve, and it was very fast, very scary, it startled me, and I put my arm up my sleeve to get him, and he bit me. So I had to undress in my pet room right next to the window. I had to undress and retrieve him from inside my shirt. And another time, more recently, I was mixing up the soil, and I'll actually include a clip of that later on when you see his enclosure. But I was mixing up his soil, and he jumped out of the soil and climbed, very quickly scaled his foam exoteric background, which I've never seen him do. It was very fast. I was pretty sure if I didn't close the doors, he was gonna jump out. I kind of just like sat there and watched him, and he watched me, and I was like, just mixing up your soil, Roku. Don't do anything wild. Just stay where you are. He's very unpredictable, but he is still young, so it will take some time for him to, you know, adjust. Skinks are this way sometimes. Like blue tongue skinks can be very hit or miss. Like sometimes they can be real personable, and sometimes they can be leave me alone please. And I think that a lot of skinks are the same way, but fire skinks are notorious for being shy. So I get to see him every morning. Like if I get up and go to the bathroom, I'll see him basking or climbing around his enclosure, but like he's very secretive throughout the day when he knows I'm awake because he hates me. So the enclosure also has to have a water dish, and it has to have a water dish that is big enough for your fire skink to get in and out of without drowning, obviously, because they have very short legs, so you don't want it to be super deep. I actually offer a water bowl, and I put like another ceramic water bowl inside as like a stepping ledge, just so that he can get in and out. I used to do that when he was smaller. Now that he's big, I don't have to, but when he was smaller, I did that. So it's an option if you have a young skink. I've only seen my skink get in and out of the water a couple times. When I was researching, it said that most of the time they won't get in and out of the water, but the water is obviously for them to drink and get in if they want to, but it also helps keep the humidity in their enclosure up. The enclosure also needs to have a food dish, and I have a little ceramic dish that I keep inside my fire skink's enclosure, and I put food in it at night because he likes to eat first thing in the morning when he wakes up, and obviously he doesn't want me to wake up to greet him in the morning, so I leave it in overnight. Fire skinks are insectivores, so you can feed them a variety of insects. I feed Roku dubia roaches, hornworms, waxworms on occasion, only on rare occasions, superworms, and mealworms. You can also feed fire skinks crickets, you can feed them phoenix worms, all kinds of stuff. They'll eat all kinds of insects. But they are purely insectivores, like they don't eat fruits or vegetables, they eat insects. One thing that you want to make sure you're doing with your insects is that you are gut loading them, and that's for any species ever that you feed. Gut loading is the process by which you offer nutritious foods to your insects so that when they die and are eaten by your animal, the animal, your pet, gets a lot of the nutrition as well. My insects are fed greens, broccoli, fruits and vegetables. They're fed all kinds of stuff. You're gonna want to avoid feeding foods like potato, for example, because it's just a filler food. Like it's not actually going to give them nutrients to give to your animals. So make sure that you're offering them nutritious vegetables. They really enjoy like citrus fruits like oranges. Cockroaches love them, superworms like them, mealworms like them. So be sure that whatever you are feeding your pet, you are also feeding well. You know, you want your pet to have the absolute best health possible, and that starts with what you're feeding your pet. In addition to gut loading the insects, you're also going to want to dust them every other feeding or every 2 feedings, depending on if you offer UVB. For people who offer UVB, you'll end up offering less calcium over time, which since I offer UVB, I don't feed him calcium as much. I do put the dust on his food every other feeding, sometimes every 2 feedings, but I use Repashy Calcium Plus, which isn't just calcium and D3, it's also a vitamin supplement. So it has all 3 things that he needs in one go, and like I said, I dust the insects with it. Now, how often do I feed my fire skink? I feed my fire skink a lot since he's growing right now, but as an adult, he'll only have to eat a couple times a week. But because my skink is growing, I feed him every other day. Sometimes I'll feed him 2 days in a row, but most of the time it's every other day. Aside from feeding and like what the enclosure looks like and should feature, there are a few more things I want to address. I spray Roku's enclosure every single day. I spray it sometimes in the evening, sometimes in the morning. It just depends on whenever I get into the pet room and it needs to be sprayed. You want the surface to be able to dry out in the period between spraying it, but also you still want it to maintain humidity within the enclosure at like a 40% on the surface level. Like I said, it can drop to 40 as long as the interior humidity in the substrate is between 60 and 70. The reason humidity is so important is, one, this species comes from forests and woodlands in Africa, and so it requires humidity in its natural setup, and also it requires humidity in order to have successful sheds. If the humidity is not proper, the shed can be poor, you can have respiratory infection problems with your fire skink, and also there might be an issue of impaction. If the substrate gets too dry and you are feeding your fire skink like freely, like not in a bowl, it could potentially get the dry substrate swallowed, like it could become impacted by eating it by accident, and it could also get it in its eyes and its nose. That's the problem with Eco Earth, is it when it dries out it's very dusty, and so you should usually only use it for species that require humidity, which is why I'm using it for my fire skink. As stated earlier, fire skinks can grow up to 15 inches, and they also sport an array of like really awesome colors. For example, their backs are like this really gorgeous bronze or copper color, and their bodies also feature black and white, they feature red and orange. They're just really, really gorgeous creatures, and they have really wide black eyes that are really glossy and like otherworldly, and then they also have really short noses, especially when they're little. Oh my god, they're so cute. When it comes to getting your fire skink, please, 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 please get a captive bred species. Importation of wild animals is horrible. I think that wild animals should stay in the wild, and whatever's already in captivity, unfortunately, remains in captivity. But there should not be any more importation. Fire skinks that are in the wild just stay in the wild, so you really shouldn't support it. If you happen to come across a captive bred specimen, awesome. Those animals are also probably going to have better health. They're going to be better equipped to be in captivity, and also they're probably going to be a bit more personal. Also, before you get a fire skink, make sure you have an exotic vet, because you never know what could happen. I literally have to take Miss Aria to the vet on Wednesday for an issue with her nose. Always be prepared. Have a vet in your area that treats exotics, or basically treats reptiles, and make sure that they treat fire skinks. Fire skinks can live 15 to 20 years, though it's really not known how long they live in captivity because they are relatively new to being kept in captivity. So who knows how long yours may live, but they can live a long time like a lot of other reptiles, so 15 to 20 years is the estimate right now. Also, they will take over a year to reach their full size, like a lot of reptiles take over a year. Leopard geckos, other types of skinks, they take over a year to reach their full size. So Roku I've had for 6 months, but he's still itty bitty compared to what he will be when he's full grown. Some people house fire skinks in pairs, in like a breeding pair, like a male and female. First of all, I don't recommend this because I don't recommend breeding or cohabiting a lot of reptiles, but they don't really get a benefit from it aside from breeding. So that's why people like to have male-female pairs. They can do really well in male-female breeding pairs, but like you're not going to want to house two males together, just random males. Like that's not going to work for them. So unless you are intending to breed them, then I wouldn't keep a pair together. And last but not least, fire skinks and their shy nature, they can be squirmy to handle. So if you have like a kid who wants a fire skink who sees it in a Petco or something, please reconsider that, because they're very fast, very squirmy, very hard to hold on to. I can say this firsthand, my fire skink is very, very, very fast, very hard to get a hold of, and he will nip me if he wants to. I've been bit twice. Once when he was up my sleeve, and then another time when I was relocating him from his 40 breeder to his Exoterra. So it's definitely a possibility. It didn't hurt or cause blood or anything, but he's also still little, so definitely want to be careful of giving such a squirmy animal to someone who's not experienced with reptiles or who is a child. So I think that's all for the actual care part of the video. I'm going to go ahead and show the enclosure and give a kind of in-depth tour, and I'm also going to include a clip of my fire skink Roku doing his thing, running away from me, and plotting my death. So enjoy. Okay everyone, so this is my fire skink enclosure. I actually just added fresh Eco Earth to it so it doesn't like look sprayed down or anything, but it's nice and moist with fresh Eco Earth. So I want to give you guys the complete tour now that I've added some, like I said 300 times now, fresh Eco Earth. So this is the large cork hide I was referencing in the video. As you can see, starts here and goes all the way up here. It offers a really good basking area for my skink, and it offers a really awesome hide. And also his heat pad is like from here to here underneath, so he has a nice little warm spot right there in the front underneath the substrate where he can spend his time. I actually had a bigger heater underneath here, but it died. which is like never happened to me before. So right now he has a temporary heater, and I'll be getting the bigger one again in a couple weeks. Also, hello Finn. So right here and right here are the two Exoterra ferns I was talking about that offer a lot of like ground coverage to make him feel safe as he travels about. And then he also feels safe when he comes out to bask, because like he'll weave between these leaves and then come out and bask. It sat a little bit higher when there was less eco earth in it, so I'm gonna try and actually make that a little bit taller, but it doesn't stay because it's on like a little incline, so that's about as good as it's gonna get. Over here is his water dish. Of course there's eco earth in it. It's literally impossible not to get any in there, but it's relatively clean, so it's good to go. This is his food dish, which of course I'll brush out before putting food in, but I keep them right next to each other and I keep them in the middle. And then he has this tall plant over here, this tall plant over here, mostly for decor purposes. This is a piece of driftwood that he can climb, and also he can hide in here. Like he's able to squeeze through and like hide in the actual piece of driftwood. He can also hide underneath this like curvy part down here where it comes back up, and then it unites with this Haba Hut hide that is buried in eco earth and also has eco earth inside. That is another hide, and it's actually sitting on top of another hide. As you can see, that dark little hole down there, this whole thing underneath is actually one giant Exoterra hide. So really cool, nice, huge area for him to really escape if he wants to get away from me, because I'm not about to unbury that cave, get it out from underneath here. That's just a lot of work. So as you can see, there's a fair amount of substrate. It's like the most minimal amount over in the middle because that's where like his food and water bowl are. But again, it gets higher up here, and he has a lot on this side over here. So look at all that wonderful eco earth for him. It's kind of hard to see because of the reflection, but it's a lot, trust me. This is his 70-watt mercury vapor bowl by the brand Mega Ray, and he uses it to bask right here. As you can see, it casts light down right there, and it warms up this entire area in the 80s, and this spot is in the 90s. I can't really show you right now because I just put new substrate down, so it's cold. Like, it's not cold, but it's like not 90, so I'll include a clip sometime tomorrow afternoon when the substrate is all back to normal and the basking spot is back to normal as well. What I'll also include tomorrow is how Roku interacts with his substrate. So basically, every time I put a new substrate in, you can see little holes where Roku has like dug his way through and made tunnels, and you can see little pathways and stuff. I think that's really fascinating, so I'll definitely be sure to include some of that tomorrow morning. So I actually suck, and I completely forgot that I had mentioned when I was filming that I was going to show the little tunnels and the light temperature. So I'll do the temperature tomorrow, but I'll do the tunnels now. So you can see a little pathway, and then there's a tunnel there, and there's also a tunnel right here. And earlier there was another one, but now I can't find it, so it must have caved in on itself, or he must have re-burrowed. But yeah, there's an example, two of the holes. And here's an example of what I mean by the top layer of substrate can dry out, but then you can see all of this moisture still down here. So there's plenty of moisture still in the substrate that offers the humidity that he needs. And also you can see where it caves in some spots, because that's where he's been. So cute. So there you go, 94, 92, 91, perfect. But that's everything. So recap: driftwood, a hide, another hide underneath here, two ferns that offer a lot of ground coverage, water bowl that he can get in and out of, food bowl for all his noms, heat pad underneath here, and a cork hide, and his basking bulb, and a lot of eco earth. So that's the entirety of his enclosure. And like I said, make sure you have secure locking doors and a secure screen top, because he is an excellent climber, as you'll see in the next clip. Oh my god, I have never seen him do that. You got so big! Look at you, look at like the size of my hand compared to him. Oh my goodness, you got so big! You're like what, a third your full grown size now? Hi. Sorry I'm disturbing you by, you know, fixing your house. Wow, look how big you've gotten. You're so beautiful. Yes, honey. Oh my goodness. Oh, Roku dear. Hello. How are you? I'm no one to be feared. No one at all. You don't have to fear me whatsoever. I'm just your mama cleaning up your house. Beautiful boy. Bye-bye. See you later, Roku. Love you. Thank you for letting me see you for 30 seconds. I appreciate it, shy boy. Goodbye. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this informational and insightful. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. I will get back to you. But that's all for this time. Please hit subscribe and the notification bell. Check the links below for social media, a Patreon, donation link, merchandise, all kinds of stuff. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.